Just a reminder to put your selves on mute, please. Okay, so hopefully you can see my screen and you can minimize everything else. You might be able to see me in the top corner. Otherwise, yeah, hopefully you can see the screen okay. All good. All right, so after 5 weeks of traveling and house sitting in Israel, Anthony, my husband, and I crossed over the border into Jordan at the country's southernmost point. Aqaba, way down here, is on the northeastern tip of the Red Sea. It is Jordan's only coastal city and therefore its only port, which makes it quite a significant town in terms of commercial and industrial activity. It's also a low tax duty-free city, attracting lots of big projects and is expected to grow into a big tourist hub. It's not too far away from Wadi Rum, the desert, and Petra, which are two of Jordan's main attractions. And your co-host, that's okay. And it's also on the coast of the Red Sea and has great snorkeling and diving opportunities, which is popular with tourists. We went snorkeling one day, organised by our Airbnb host. He took us to a couple of good snorkeling spots, and then we had a barbecue dinner on the beach. The snorkeling was good. We saw some lovely corals and a sunken plain. We went to a couple of dive sites. This is us having our barbecue. Just moments before this picture was taken, though, I managed to flick sand up onto the barbecue. But I was avoiding that because I'm vegetarian, so the others would have had some sandy chicken and fish. I had my own packed dinner. Now, this is a video, and I'm hoping the sound is going to also work when I play it for you. You can tell me after, but just to give you a bit of an idea of what it was like there.
Speakers. I don't know. I never had that before. That was long. Week or something. Long week as well. That's something to do with the Zoom, isn't it? Possibly, because I.
Right. Could everybody hear that? Mary and Margaret,
No.
I can see you. Can you just give me a thumbs up if you heard it? No. No. Oh, bugger. Okay, the video didn't have sound. Okay, thank you. Share computer sound. We'll try again.
We are here in Jordan.
Can you hear that?
About to have a barbecue. That's Abed, our host. Behind him is Saudi Arabia over there where the lights are. We've just been swimming, snorkeling. That's Egypt over there. And then further around we've got Eilat, which is in Israel where we were a couple of days ago, and Aqaba, Jordan, where we are now. We're about to have dinner. It's lovely here at the Red Sea.
Did you hear it that time? Mary, could you give me a thumbs up if you can hear it? You're the only person I can see. Yes, great. Okay, thank you. Right, so that gives you a good idea of where we were there in Aqaba. We spent most of the time in Aqaba though here, which is the apartment that we rented on Airbnb. We had been traveling in Israel and we were quite tired of traveling and needed a bit of a base. So actually we started off our trip in Jordan by working quite a lot in the apartment, planning our trip and catching up on the blog. So yeah, that's where we stayed, and it was in a suburb, not near the centre or anything, no other tourists around. We went for a walk to get some fresh air most days and walked around our neighbourhood, came across this bakery, really friendly Jordanians making fresh pita bread. We were hoping for a sweet treat at the bakery, but mostly had these kind of dry things. And yeah, we found some lunch. That's some sort of grilled sandwich. I got a falafel, Anthony got one with meat. And then we found a sweet treat. That was a waffle with nuts, pancake with chocolate and fruit. That definitely satisfied the sweet cravings. While we were out and about, we noticed something interesting about the pavements. So it seems that in Jordan, the pavement is the responsibility of the house owner. So if there's no house, if there's an empty lot, then there's no pavement, like you can see here. And when you get to a new house, there's a new pavement. So this is the end of the one house here, and here's the beginning of the next one with a new pavement. So we found that quite interesting, that outside every house, the pavement changed. So here's just some different pavements. And then sometimes when we were walking along, well, some people got creative and planted trees on their outside their house on their pavement. Others put lots of plants, and some even fenced it off. This is walking along the pavement, facing the pavement, not the street, and they just fenced off the pavement completely, put down artificial grass and incorporated that into the yard. So we had to walk on the street.
Well, it seemed to me.
Oh, could you mute
that
yourself,
it's
please?
Kate's hand.
John,
If we haven't
could you
got
mute?
any audio on this device.
All right. So yeah, that's the pavement there. That's just become part of the street, part of the yard. Sorry, and we had to walk on the street. There's another example. They've actually fenced off the sidewalk. That was one of our favourites, kind of trippy pavement pattern. All right, so we did head down into town a couple of times. To the centre of Aqaba. There wasn't too much to look at, to be fair. We were interested that right down in the heart of the city, between the city centre and the beach, we had a strip of garden here, growing food, so that was kind of interesting. We bought food at the markets and cooked at home quite a lot, so lentils and salads and things. We got down to town by these cool minivans. We were told, just stand on this corner and you'll grab a van will come past and go to town. And sure enough, that's what happened. And yeah, we found the Jordanian people very friendly. Our first ride in a van was with someone that could hardly speak English, but we managed to converse all the way into town anyway. Very friendly people. And most of the time when we were driving in these vans, the van would drive with the door open, and often the assistant to the driver would kind of hang out the door a bit and yell out to those on the street, asking if anyone wanted to be picked up. So the vans just drove along a route and stopped anywhere and picked up people anywhere along the route. Taxis were really cheap as well. Really cheap, but we preferred to catching these minivans because we just liked the experience. So one night we went out for dinner to this place, which had great reviews on TripAdvisor, and the food was really good. Having just spent 5 weeks in Israel, I must say we much preferred the food in Jordan. Some of it was a bit similar, but it was all much cheaper, both the food to buy and cook yourself, and also the food when you ate out. Similar to Israel was the amount of stray cats. This was a friendly one at the restaurant. We had a wee walk after dinner and headed down to the shore where there was a whole lot of people. This is a Friday night. Lots of people hanging out, mostly in groups of men together and women together, playing music. And you'd have, like, these guys would be having, music over here, and then these girls would be playing some other music. There was just music everywhere, which was quite interesting. And that's, you can see that's Aqaba over. This is still Aqaba, but then over to the left over there is Israel. Eilat in Israel, so that's looking at Eilat across there. That's the Israeli city. These guys here were singing really beautiful sort of acoustic song, and I did do a little video of them, but it's a bit hard to hear because not far away from them was some young guys dancing to pop music, which I've also pictured on the video, so have a little listen. Yeah, so as you can see, lots going on there. Oh, I don't want to play, sorry. Yeah, lots going on and lots of people socialising. The shisha pipes are really popular as well. Lots of people smoking with those. And here was a cafe where they were just men only, as you might notice, but plenty of women were using them as well on the beach. After Aqaba, we head into the desert to Wadi Rum. So Wadi Rum is a 720 square kilometre desert, which has been inhabited by various human cultures since 10,000 BC. These days it's home to lots of camels, four-wheel drives, and Bedouin people, most of whom seem to be involved in the tourist industry. So we got a taxi a driver to take us to Wadi Rum. He dropped us off at the Wadi Rum village. This is just the entrance to the village where we had to show our passports and our Jordan pass, which was a tourist pass that we got, and I would recommend to anyone considering travelling in Jordan. It means you get free access to lots of sites. So we showed that there and then got dropped off at the office in the village. Then we'd booked a tour with Wadi Rum nomads, and so they soon put us in jeeps and drove us across the desert to our camp for the night, and this is the camp. So yeah, we stayed in these little things here. It was kind of like camping, but really glamping. And that's Anthony in our little tent, I guess you could call it. And inside was pretty simple. This was a window we could open and 2 single beds. And there was a little light in there from solar power. And then this is the main tent where everybody spent time when they went out on a tour or sleeping. This was where you ate and where there was a little bit of power, so you could charge up your device and hang out. And that's what people are doing. So all around the outside there were these sort of soft cushions, and people were reading and doing whatever they were doing, chatting about the day. And this is where we had dinner and breakfast. And the way they cooked is a little bit similar to the way Māori people in New Zealand cook, and that is under the ground. So it's a bit like a hangi. So that was quite interesting to see. We've got, this is when them pulling up the food. So it had been cooked underneath the ground, and then they pulled it up. Yeah, that thing there was all underground. So yeah, that's how we got our food cooked each night. And it was really good food and lots of it. That was great. After that we spent time just blogging and hanging out, and we met some interesting people there, and yeah, it was good. Next day, I woke up early and took this little film.
Here we are in Wadi Rum, the desert in the south of Jordan. It's about 6:20 in the morning. This is the camp we were staying with our Bedouin hosts. Solar power over there means we've got a bit of light in the evening. It's glamping, really.
Cool. So I was talking quite quietly there because I didn't want to wake people up. And this was on an early morning walk just nearby the camp. It's, as you can see, absolutely stunning. Just fantastic place to be. So it was worth the money to go and stay and explore Wadi Rum. So we were in a van with a Dutch couple and our driver, local host. And the first stop for the full day tour that we'd booked was a narrow canyon that cuts Jabal Khazali. And here's Anthony in the canyon, and this was actually my favourite place that we saw all day. It was the first thing we saw. So that's a really narrow canyon, and it's considered a holy site because it's a place where water collects, which of course is important in the desert. What made it so cool and my favourite place was all of the Nabatean petroglyphs on the wall. So I'm not sure if you can see, I've zoomed in, but they were quite high up and a little bit far away. But this is an image here of a woman giving birth and as is the tradition, and still is the tradition for desert people giving birth, she is standing on 2 stones. So that's that. There's another human figure here and here. These were really high up, images chiseled into the rocks. We've got some people there. I loved the feet. There were lots of images of the feet and also lots of mountain goats. And there's more people. They almost look like they're holding hands. These images are about 2,000 years old. And it's amazing they're in such good condition, but that's largely because they're out of reach of humans. They're really high up. I don't know how they got up there to do them in the first place, but they're really high up, and they're also out of reach of the elements. They're quite protected in this canyon. The ones that are lower down aren't so well preserved. There's more feet. So yeah, there were a lot of engravings right beside us as we walked in the canyon. Engravings of animals and also script. There's some like middle-age graffiti from the Middle Ages, and also some really early Arabic script from the end of the 7th century. There's some quotes from the Quran and also names of deceased people, and in some cases the dates that they died. There's even older script from the 3rd or 4th century BCE, and lots of pictures of animals. And the next stop was the Red Dune. That was a big climb up the sand dune, and then we got up to what was like a rocky top. So this was another amazing place. That's Anthony in the picture. And yeah, just sort of taking some shots from up the top there, you can get an idea of what it's like. You might spot the odd dot on the sand. That's either a camel or a jeep. There were a lot of different tourist camps and people on tours there. Here's another little video. It's a panorama. Oops.
Here we are in Wadi Rum. We've just climbed up the sand dune with a bit of rock on top, and this is the 360 panorama. We can see over there you've got Wadi Rum village, and throughout the desert you can see some small dots on the sand. That's jeeps, there's camels crisscrossing. There are different camps. Our camp is over beyond, over that way.
Okay, so that's Anthony heading back down the dune, back to the jeep. The next stop we went to in Wadi Rum was what's called the Lawrence Spring, and there's a big rock at the bottom of the mountain. This one here, which has got an inscription letting people know that there is a freshwater spring at the top of the mountain. I don't know if you can see people walking up. It's a really steep walk up here to the spring, which is about where my arrow is now. So we walked up there, and that was what we found. There was no fresh water. It was just this green sludge. So that was slightly disappointing. But that's because all the water from the spring is being pumped down the hill to fill the cisterns to feed the camels and the goats. So that's where all the water was. So that was a little bit disappointing when we heard that it was called a spring and expected something a bit different. But the views from up there made the climb worth it. So that's the view looking back down from where we started. You can see it's pretty steep. Yeah. This was a little bridge that we visited, one of many rock bridges that we visited this day. Just a couple of photos of the trip. We stopped for lunch near this mushroom rock, so our driver led us out, and then he went and set up a little fire and made us lunch while we explored. So these pictures are just from around that area. We found some flora and fauna, which was quite lovely in the desert. And yeah, so this is just, this is that area. All kinds of rock formations, like kind of smooth and then pokey and really multicolored. Yeah, this is our driver with the fire and cooking up some lunch for us. He had this nifty board to cut tomatoes on and then just move the tomatoes down into the bowl, which was very handy. we cooked up some tomato dish, made a salad, and we had hummus, and there was something meat or fishy, I think, and hummus there. I can't remember what that one was, and of course the flatbread. So that was lunch that we shared and enjoyed, and then we headed off to the Abu Kashaba Canyon. So we walked through the canyon, and then our driver met us at the other end. And this is coming out the other end where we then went sandboarding. So our driver had snowboards in the car, and I couldn't be bothered walking up the hill because it's actually quite steep and difficult in the sand. But Anthony and the Dutch guy went up there and then came down on their snowboards. So they were having lots of fun and did it a couple of times. These are some of the drivers watching. And this is Anthony. It's only 2 seconds because he was pretty fast, but this is a little film of him at the end of his trip. We really enjoyed this day. It was just fantastic, zooming around in the desert. This is the last rock bridge we went to. I didn't bother going up. It was quite narrow and steep and a lot of people, but that's Anthony up top there. We watched the sun go down before heading back to our campsite. This is leaving the camp the next morning, and we spent a day getting to Petra. It's not very far away, but by the time we got there and got sorted into our accommodation, we got our Anthony's pants that had ripped, we got them fixed, and we got some food, and we just got kind of sorted out. And then the next morning, we were at Jordan's #1 attraction, Petra, at 6 in the morning. It is huge. We decided to spend 2 days exploring, and I'm really pleased we did. There's so much to see. You can see it all in one day, but it's it would be really exhausting. It's quite a lot of walking. So this is us just through the entrance. This is called Bab al-Siq, which is the gateway to the Siq. It's nearly 1 kilometre long, 900 metres, before you sort of get to the main part of Petra. So there's some interesting things along the way though. And then you get to the Siq, which is a 1,200 metre long entrance to the ancient city of Petra. It's mostly a natural rock formation. Some parts were carved out by the Nabatean Arabs who founded the city in the 2nd century BCE. There's evidence of human settlements in this area dating to 9,000 BCE. But the Nabatean tribes established their own state here, making Petra their capital. It was called Rakhmu at that time. Now you can see in this photo at the bottom left here and all the way through the canyon, there's a little channel for water on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side as well, they found pottery pipes also to channel water. So the Nabateans were amazing hydraulic engineers, and they created a dam at the start of the Siq and to prevent water from flooding, a tunnel, and yeah, it's pretty impressive what they did more than 2,000 years ago. And because these water channels that carry water into the city of Petra, because they created this and brought water from further away here, it meant that the previously nomadic people could become permanent settlers, like they settled here. So this is still all through the Siq. And this was probably my favourite part. This is a human figure here, larger than life, person who's leading the caravan of camels. And you can just see sort of the belly of the camel here and the camel's feet, and behind it the channel for the water. There's some more feet there. So there were a few camels, obviously disintegrated a bit over the years. Yeah, so lots of caravans did head in and out of Petra on their way from the Arabian Peninsula in the south to the north, to the Levant in the north, and from the east, from China and into Europe. So it was a real cross-section, and that's why during the 1st century BC and the 1st century CE, this area, this Petra, really grew in wealth and power because of its location. and all the trading routes that went through it. Okay, so now we're heading to the main part of Petra. This is the treasury, which you get a glimpse of at the end of the Seek. It is pretty flippin' fantastic, carved out of the sandstone rock in the 1st century. I mean, it just blows your mind when you see it, and I can't imagine what it would be like for people in the 1st century seeing this. It was built, is believed to be built for a Nabatean king as the mausoleum and crypt. Unfortunately, local men at the start of the 20th century thought that the urn above the door had contained some treasure, and so they started to shoot at it. And you can see lots of bullet holes when you're there. But yeah, it's amazing it survived so well despite earthquakes and bullets and the passage of time. It's really huge. You can kind of get a sense of it when you see these people down the bottom in this picture. Yeah, it's really beautiful and just fantastic place. So we walked up a bit of a path to go and view it from a higher point. Past the treasury, you'll find the facades street. There was lots and lots of tombs, and you can walk inside them. And some of them have got interesting features, like this one up here with the square that's at the top. This is inside one of them. Next up, so here you can see there's lots and lots of tombs. Next up was the theatre. That was carved in the 1st century and could hold 6,000 people. Researchers think that pilgrims probably used it for their rituals, and in Roman times it would have been used for musical and theatrical performances and public meetings and things like that. Past the theatre, you get to the main street of Petra, which is the colonnaded street. It was built in 106 CE under the Roman occupation, and it had columns that lined it. Unfortunately, they all got an earthquake sort of ruined those, and these ones have just been put up, what was left, what they could find. This main street probably hosted markets that traded goods like frankincense and myrrh, as well as semi-precious stones, textiles and spices. You can see some of the Roman paving still there, and the way that it sloped downwards, you can perhaps see that. That was to allow drainage of water to all the network of channels that are underneath the street. Off the street to the left is the Great Temple. It was built between 25 BC and 100 BC and 100 CE. It's the largest freestanding building area in Petra. Although it's called a temple, it was more of a secular, it was like had a secular function rather than a religious one. It had 2 open areas at different elevations. That's a picture of an elephant-headed capital, which is quite cool, like the hexagonal tiles. I like those. This is a council, a theatre they think might have been used as a council chamber. It's just a small theatre, or perhaps as a judiciary assembly hall. Also near here they found baths and an underground drainage system and a workshop, all suggesting that it had a secular function. So that's what they call the Great Temple. This is the Temenos Gate, which is was an arched entrance to the temple precinct. So we've passed the Great Temple, then we go through this and we get to the actual temple, which is called Qasr al-Bint. It was built between 25 BC and 25 CE. And it's incredible that it's still standing. It's so huge. Only priests could enter the temple, so the worshippers could remain outside. And there are 27 marble steps, you can see there, leading up to the inner part of the temple. And there were once columns, Corinthian columns, all along here. And it was all plastered, and you can still see a lot of plastering there. So that was the Qasr al-Bint temple. After that, we head on to the Ad Dir Trail leading up to the monastery. So that was just a trail going up and up some more. It was pretty nice views, lots of steps. And then we get to the monastery. Like the treasury, it was carved out of the hillside and it's huge as well, 48 metres by 47, 48 height, 47 width. The hall inside here was used as a Christian chapel, at one point, and crosses were carved in the rear wall, and that's why it's called the monastery. So here's just some views. There's me looking at it from a different angle, but further away. And then we found the friendly cat and thought that was a pretty good spot for a photo. So that's the monastery. Heading on down at the bottom of that trail from the monastery, we're heading back down the same trail, and this is the lion triclinium, which was used for ritual banquets, and there are 2 lions on either side of the entrance, which is pretty cool. And then instead of walking back down that main road, that's that main road there, we're heading back towards back again. Instead of walking down that road, we head along a road on the left of that, where we had a great view of the Great Temple. So that's that secular function temple. This is, we're at the Temple of the Winged Lions, which is from the 1st century. It's got those great views. And then standing in the same place, so looking across that way was the temple, looking down here is the colonnaded street, all the way back in there was the theatre, and over here are the royal tombs. And before we get to them are some churches. So that's the Temple of the Winged Lions. Here's a church, Petra Church, that happened to be a church service when we went in there. It's pretty cool. It was built in the 5th century, and they've put a roof over it to protect all the floor mosaics. They've also roped it off so you can't walk on them. The mosaic floor was pretty impressive, with lots of animals and personifications of the 4 seasons. Lots of plants and birds, so really interesting. The Blue Chapel was named that way because of these 4 blue Egyptian granite columns. They were probably moved there from other Nabatean monuments nearby. This is the first of the royal tombs we saw, called the Palace Tomb. There are 12 decorated columns and 4 gates, which lead to 4 rooms for burial. Pretty impressive. This is the Corinthian tomb. Although it's very withered, it's still impressive, with similar heights to the treasury. And then this is the Silk Tomb, and we could go inside all of these. And the Silk Tomb is from the 1st century. Its name comes from the pretty colours in the sandstone that make it look like silk drapery over a tomb. This is the Urn Tomb, and it's the most distinctive of all the royal tombs, cut into the cliff face around 70 CE. So you have to climb those staircases to get up to the large courtyard. It's flanked by these colonnaded porticos. There's a very tall entrance. You might be able to see someone at the bottom of your screen to give you an indication how tall even just this entrance is. At the top, there's 3 inaccessible burial chambers. But we could go in here. This is believed to be a tomb of a king because of its location and also its amazing views. This is inside. So in the 5th century, Christians converted it into a cathedral, and they put in those arches there in the 5th century. But check out the roof, absolutely stunning colours, really beautiful. And they were all like this, just it blows your mind, the natural beauty, and then the ability of people way back then to create these things. That was the view looking out. And then that's the view from the outside of it, looking across. So it's got a great view down the main street of Petra, down to the main temple. So we had entrance this way into Roman Theatre, main street all the way down here, and the monastery was way up over there. So you can perhaps get a sense of how big it is and how much walking we did. So that was the end of our first day. And we found a place to get refreshments afterwards. Food, really good food. We enjoyed the food in Jordan. Second day saw us heading back through the Bab el-Sik, back through the Siq, and then instead of walking towards the theatre, we took a left up the hill, and this is heading up to the high place of sacrifice. So that's, again, we started about 6 in the morning, so we had very few people that we saw en route. And the first sign that you're near the top of the to get to the high place of sacrifice are these obelisks. They're both over 6 meters tall, and they are believed to represent some Nabatean deities. What is rather amazing is that these things were not placed here. The side of the mountain was cut away and levelled to leave them sticking up like this. So yeah, pretty interesting. And this is now the top, the high place of sacrifice. So I explain things a little in this video.
This is the high place of sacrifice where animals were killed and offered as sacrifices. Here, drainage for their blood there. This is the view. It's pretty amazing. This is where Nefertiti, God statue was, here. And then here's the view. Antony's in the distance there. And here's where the people would have sat watching the sacrifice. And over there is a pool where they collected the water to wash the animals.
Sorry, hopefully you didn't get too dizzy there. It was a little bit quick in places. But yeah, that's where they did the sacrifice there, and the drainage for the blood. And this is where people would have sat and watched. It was an amazing sight, and not only for the history and what you can still see, but also the views. So we took the opportunity to take a few photos up here. Really fascinating, great views. And then we headed on down the western cliff of the Ataf Ridge. And this is us heading down now into Wadi Farasa. So it forms like a big loop that ends us back up at the Qasr al-Bint temple. Takes a couple of hours. There's quite a lot to see on the way, and we really enjoyed the walk. Didn't see many people, but we did see a few animals. So this is looking down. We're heading down the bottom there. You can see we're down there in a couple of slides. Yeah, so that's a cistern at the bottom of the hill. This donkey we saw at the Lion Fountain. So this was once a lion with lots of water that gushed out of its mouth, and then it collected in a basin here, and then it spilled down into that large cistern at the bottom of the hill. And they think that perhaps this fountain here was to like encourage the devotees as they were like walking up to the sacrifice place, because it's quite a walk, steep walk. Here's another animal we spotted on our travels. Yeah, so at the bottom, we got to this place called the Garden Triclinium. I am just amazed at the colours in the rock. It's just spectacular. These are not photoshopped. They really are that amazing. This is inside the Garden Triclinium, which is this little building here near the cistern. There were more tombs to explore, and some of them were average inside, some were really interesting. Some had sculptures on the outside and so on. And then we get back round to Qasr al-Bint, the big temple. This is us approaching it. We didn't quite know what to do. We followed a sign for a museum, but it was a museum that had long since closed. And so we kind of explored on our own, went round a corner and then up some steps. And then we ended up here and we just kept going and no one else was there. And it turns out to be a Crusader fort built in 1115. And we had this place and these magnificent views all to ourselves, so it made it really special. So this is looking back down. So we entered over here somewhere. The main streets here, the big sort of secular temples here, Qasr al-Bint main temples here, the royal tombs over here, and the monastery way down that way, churches over here, and the high place of sacrifice up here somewhere. So yeah, you can really see the whole of Petra, well, almost. We really enjoyed it, so we took lots of jumping photos and had fun enjoying the views, and actually the high place of sacrifice is over this side. So that was that. Yeah, and then we pretty much headed back the way we came. Past all the crowds. By this time there were loads of people walking through here and loads of these carts going really fast. We just opted to walk all the way, but I can understand why people would get a horse and cart through the Sikh, and then maybe donkeys for the other part, because it is a lot of walking. This is the museum which we visited after. Really nice modern new museum with some great artifacts and good history in there. So they were just some things that were found in Petra that they've kept there. We took a bus from there to Amman, the city's capital, and this is where we stayed. It's called Shams Community. Some nights of the week they rent out these rooms for travellers, and some nights of the week they hold special discussion nights, so they don't rent it out. And there's this kind of combined kitchen area here was really lovely. It was raining. We saw rain for the first time in a long time. So we just spent some time chilling in this area before venturing out to a local cafe, which was really lovely, really good food. And then we braved the rain and headed into the city centre. And this is us at the Citadel in Amman. And there's a Roman temple, there's a Byzantine church, and there's an Islamic mosque. So it's all happening. This is the 8th century, what do you call it? Cistern. Yeah. There's, yeah, let me see. Yeah, that cistern was built in 730. And this is a large Islamic palace. Also from the 8th century, so that was pretty special to see. And I like this picture of the Roman temple and the hand of someone I've forgotten. Yeah, there's a pretty modest little museum there, but it's got some really ancient objects, which was actually quite interesting to see, like these human figures, which are from 6,500 BCE. It's just crazy. And there's like 9,000 BCE history on that mountain of civilization since 9,000 BCE. All right, the next day we rented a car, left the city and headed east to some desert castles. I don't have a whole lot to say about these, so I'm just going to show you the photos. This is Qasr Rana from the 8th century. This is Qasr Amra, also from the 8th century, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, because of these amazing frescoes that are in the reception hall and bathhouse. This was a hunting pavilion used as a temporary residence by members of the ruling family in the early 8th century. The richly decorated walls reflect the secular art of the time. And as you can see, they're being restored, mostly by French-speaking people. Pretty amazing. The whole room was just covered in these mosaics, the ceilings, the walls. Yeah. Next up was Azraq, where we had falafel in this little place. Dirt cheap and really delicious. Azraq Castle is famous for these stone doors. They still work, they hinge, and they are stone. So this castle is like a strategic military location, built by the Romans around the year 200 and then rebuilt by Islamic leaders in the 13th century. Apart from the cool stone doors, we also really liked the roofs and found that really fascinating that they used stones to make the ceilings. Wouldn't like to be there in an earthquake, but quite fascinating how they did that. There's also a whole lot of engraved stones from the nearby Azraq wetland area. Yeah, so that was Azraq. And then the last castle we visited was called Qasr al-Halabat, which was originally a Roman fortress from the 2nd century. And then I think in the 8th century, the Roman things were ordered to be demolished and it was redeveloped as a military site. And it became one of the grandest of the desert complexes. There's mosaics on the floor you can still see. There's a complicated water system, a bathhouse, and 5 cisterns. That's Anthony looking at some mosaics that have been roped or fenced off there. So yeah, it was pretty cool, cool place. There were towers in each corner and basalt and limestone. Plus, yeah, fort. There was engravings and all sorts. After that, we headed to Jerash and stayed in this rather blue room. It was a funny little place with a pokey wee kitchen and a very basic toilet that's there on the floor. But in a funny little living room, but it was fine. And above us were the owners of the place, the hosts. And the first night we paid them and had some dinner with them, and that's dinner there. The next day we decided to explore a place called Ajlon. The highlight wasn't the Ajlon Castle, but this place where we had lunch. Just such lovely views, great service, nice food. Yeah, really good. And this is Ashland Castle, built in 1184, military castle. This is the pigeon, where the pigeons were kept. So this was a really important communication route between all kinds of major cities back then. And also, so they used pigeons for communication. They kept them in cages in here. And then when they were ready, they attached messages to their legs and sent them off. This castle was great. There was lots of information on boards about the castle and what you were seeing, which wasn't the case in all the castles we saw. The oldest parts of the castle incorporated what was a Byzantine church. So that's where this fish and loaves mosaic came from. Really early, nice views from the top of the castle. The next day trip, and I'm conscious that we are running out of time, so I might just fly through this. This was a place called Qais, or Gadara, which was a Decapolis city. You can see all kinds of stuff here. I think that was an octagonal church, a basilica. There were great views here through to Syria, and then over to the Lake Tiberias, or Sea of Galilee, and Palestine, Israel, and into Jordan, of course, as well. So there you can see that Lake Tiberias, and we were there on the other side, on the Israeli side, a few weeks beforehand. Cool ancient city. This is where the shops and markets were, and a theatre. So yeah, Jordan is pretty much characterised by lots of ancient cities. This is another one that was also on that Roman, the 10 cities on the Roman sort of eastern border. This is called Pella, named after the birthplace of Alexander the Great. So that's Pella. And this is Jerash. Now, Jerash is the second most visited site after Petra, I think, in Jordan. It's not that far from the capital, Amman, so it's quite an easy trip for people to make if they stay there. We were actually staying in Jerash. This is Hadrian's Arch, one of the gateways to the city. Inside is a museum. These sculptures were only found a few years ago, like 2017. And this is Zeus, who's the patron of Jerash, and Aphrodite, the Greek goddess of love and prosperity. They're from the 2nd century, only just recently discovered. This is another gateway into the big city of Jerash. So here's Jerash. It's on the King's Highway, a really important trade route that we also mentioned before, goes through Petra and up to Jerash and further north into Damascus. So in the 4th century BCE, a small village here really began to grow into this thriving city under the rule of Alexander the Great. And its prosperity is because of where it lies on those trading routes. But because although it brought riches, the trading routes also brought conquerors. And in 63 CE, it was absorbed into Rome. And under Roman rule, it became one of the greatest Roman cities of the Decapolis. It started to decline again in the 3rd century, and then it was abandoned, and for centuries lay under the sand until it was discovered in 1806. So here's some pictures from Jerash. This is the Oval Plaza, and this is the main thoroughfare, the Cardo, main street. This is us with a guide. We paid to get a professional guide to take us through because we thought we'd get more out of it, and we certainly did. He pointed out all sorts of interesting things like the butchery here, and talked to us about the sewage systems and the water, and yeah, it was amazing. You can see the dent marks here from carts. It was a really cool place to wander around, both with the guide and then afterwards by ourselves. This was the Fountain Court, which was part of a cathedral. This was a just remind people to put themselves on mute if they're not already. We can hear a bit of background noise. So this was a theatre. There are 2 theatres, and this is the South Theatre, built for performances and also political assembly. And this is the North Theatre. Oh, hang on a minute. Oh, I think I might have got my photos mixed up. This is the Temple of Artemis in the 2nd century, built then but never completed. Huge columns, 11 of the 12 original huge columns remain. There was actually plans to have 32 of them. There are also churches in Jerash and some mosaics. Again, lots of mosaics, and we haven't even got into the really good mosaic stuff yet. But yeah, so that's Jerash. Really cool place. This is the other theatre, the North Theatre. And this is the Zeus Temple that overlooks the city. That was the most important of the Roman monuments, but it's mostly non-existent now. And that was an olive press we saw in what was a shopping area. And that was our host, or our host's friend, who spoke English and communicated with us and invited us around to his place. He was very interesting. This is another city we visited called Salt. I can't remember anything about it, so I'm just going to skip through these photos, but just to give you a taste of another more modern city in between all the ruins. So this was the marketplace. That's a boxing club, we think we found out, but it's a funny name. And we got some falafel here, and the guy gave us some free hot drinks in interesting cups. He was the friendly falafel guy. Then we headed up to this place called Qasr al-Abd, where there were some natural caves. People settled here in the 2nd century. That's looking out from the caves, quite a fertile area. This is Aramaic writing, and these caves were used as burial spaces, as shelters in times of crisis, and then later as houses for the local inhabitants. So that's just the view out of one of the caves. And just nearby it is this palace, which would have resembled a ship floating on an inland sea because it was built in an artificial lake. It was surrounded by an artificial lake, fed by water from nearby sources. This is from the 2nd century BC. So pretty amazing. Huge stones, massive stones, splendid carvings. It wasn't ever completed. But really interesting to wander around. We were the only people there. Look at the size of these stones, they're just huge. Yeah, so really interesting. Here are some of the carvings. There were lions and panthers. Yeah. So that's Qasr al-Abd. We drove on from there to Madaba. And Madaba this is just on our drive to Madaba. Give you an idea of the countryside. Madaba is famous for one thing, and that is its mosaic map. And this is the church where the mosaic map is found. It's called St. George's Church. It's the oldest surviving depiction of the Holy Land in the world. It's from the 6th century, and it's pretty incredible. So this is Jerusalem, and it identifies numerous places that we've been, and that when discovered weren't known about, but since then, the archaeological digs have confirmed that this map is really accurate. This is the Dead Sea and the River Jordan, and as you can see, there's loads of writing, and that's all the town names. It names a whole lot. So yeah, it's a really special piece. This is Jerusalem here. So this was, built in the 6th, the map was created in the 6th century, and in 746, Madaba was largely destroyed by an earthquake, and so the city was abandoned. So the mosaic wasn't sort of discovered again until 1884, when there was a Greek Orthodox church being constructed here. And then in the following decades, lots of it got lost and ruined. And then in the 60s, Germany gave a lot of Deutschmarks to save the mosaic, to preserve it, restore it, and conserve it. And thank goodness they did. There's over 2 million little pieces that make up that mosaic. It was originally 21 by 7 meters. Now it's 16 meters by 5 meters. There are 150 towns, all labeled in Greek. Yeah, the oldest known geographic floor mosaic in history. Cool. There were lots of other things to see in Madaba. I'm conscious of the time. This was a circular nave in the Church of the Virgin Mary, taken on the circular Roman temple that it was built on top of. This is from the 7th or 8th century. This is a hall found in 1905 with incredible mosaics. I really loved this one. This is called the Hippolytus Hall, inspired by a Greek tragedy. These are personifications of 3 cities, Rome, Gregoria, and Madaba. And all the characters from that Greek legend are all here. And if you know the story, you can probably follow a bit of what's going on in the scene. Really amazing mosaics. And this was the Church of the Apostles from the 6th century. Again, mosaics from that time. Just really kind of blows your mind. Yeah. So this is Mount Nebo, which tradition says Moses died after seeing the Holy Promised Land. Great views up here. There was a metal sculpture with a bronze serpent to do with story in the Bible about Moses. And there were more mosaics here, which are from 530 AD. Just incredible. Look at them. I mean, it's just amazing what people could do way back then. All right, I'm conscious that it's 8:30. If you need to leave, feel free to do so. But I'm going to carry on for a little bit just to get finished. But if you need to leave, I understand, because it was scheduled just for an hour. There was an olive tree planted by the Pope up here on Mount Nebo as well. So we took in the views and yeah, enjoyed our little trip. The next day we headed to al-Rasis, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. We were the only people there. It was a Roman military camp, and then it became a town from about the 5th century. Most of it's not excavated yet. The remains are from the 3rd to the 9th century. There were 16 churches here. Again, more mosaics. And we just sort of rambled and wandered all over the place. The main attraction is the Church of St. Stephen's, which has the most incredible mosaics. The World Heritage inscription says that these mosaics, that this is them here, are a masterpiece of human creative genius. So this is St. Stephen's Church, and this is pretty special. So this is like the front of the church and the main hall of the church, and the entire thing is just covered in mosaics. This is looking now from the middle of the church, looking towards the front of the church. When it became unpopular to have human figures, some people thought that was, not allowed, so they got rid of the human figures, which is a real shame in the middle there, so you can see that looks a bit funny. But all around the outside, there is incredible original detail. It was completed in 785, so from the 8th century. And there's raised footbridges you can just see in the corner there, so that you can actually get quite a good view of the mosaics. So that's looking up the front. There's 27 cities represented like this. Okay, so here's one. There's all kinds of cities. That's Madaba. And there's Caesarea and Gaza and all sorts. And here's some more details over here. It was just astounding. You have to go and visit. So there's just more detail of those amazing mosaics. All right, we are very nearly near the end. So that's Gaza. From that place, we headed up and over the Mujib Gorge to a dam, and we stopped to enjoy the views and had a look at the dam. Anthony really loves dams. There he is having a wee look at the water. And then we went along the King's Highway to Karak Castle. We were a bit castled out. I think Anthony might nearly have been mosaicked out, but I was still enjoying the mosaics. But we were a bit castled out by the time we got there. But on the way, we stopped at the bakery. And this deserves a little mention because there were quite a few bakeries with these type of Arab sort of sweets. And this occasion, we gave over our plastic container, trying to be conscious about our waste and not produce any more. So we gave them our container to fill up, but then they wrapped it in plastic, so that kind of defeated that purpose. But anyway, it was really delicious. And when we went to pay for it, the shop owner said, you don't need to, because the fellas in front of you, that's these two, have paid for it for you. So that was really kind and totally surprising. And so we grabbed them before they exited the shop and said thank you and could we have a photo. So yeah, super lovely people in Jordan. This is Curragh Castle. There was very little information about the places we saw, so we just kind of wandered through. It's a bit of a mix of European, Byzantine and Arab design. It's a Crusader castle from the 1140s. And yeah, look at the steep drop off. It's a great place for a castle because it had 3 steep sides. And then we carried on from Curragh Castle, which is here on the King's Highway. We ducked inland and went along the coast of the Dead Sea. So this is just the travels down to the Dead Sea and along the Dead Sea now. We're driving along and this is the kind of thing we saw. I think I've got probably less than 5 minutes to go, if you're wondering. And yeah, so this is the Dead Sea here on our left. The sun was setting, but we really wanted to have a swim in the hot springs. So the main hot springs, they sort of have a waterfall further up, and then this is, you know, the river down towards the sea. It was mostly men, so I didn't go in there in my bathing suit. Anthony's there amongst all the locals enjoying the hot water. And then from here, we had to go down quite a steep, well, yeah, quite a climb down the hill to the Dead Sea. And what was in great contrast to when we went to the Dead Sea on the other side in Israel was that there was no one here. The people had just left because the sun was setting. So there were some people here, but they'd just left. And so we were here by ourselves, just floating and enjoying the stillness and the sun going down. So yeah, that was really special and worth doing. So after this, I think we just stopped at a petrol station. And while we were there, we saw these fellas, very friendly locals filling up their tractor. And then we headed back to Madaba, packed up Airbnb, which was a pretty nice one, and headed back towards the Dead Sea that next morning. So this is us at the Dead Sea Panorama, which is a really amazing viewpoint. That's, of course, Israel on the other side there. And it's quite high up. There's a great museum there with heaps of information that's showing you the size of the Dead Sea and how it's shrinking. A bit concerning. And this is us descending now down to the Dead Sea and then all the way up the Jordan Valley, which is quite a fertile area. And then we head back to Amman, which is where our trip finishes. This is our Airbnb in Amman. This is the view from our window. You can see the citadel over here, where there was a Coldplay concert the night before we arrived, or a couple of nights before we arrived. And we headed back to our first place accommodation for the discussion night that they were having. So there was a big dinner and then discussion nights with people from all different cultures. So that was an interesting experience at Shams community. And in my group, we were discussing decision-making, whether it's based on reason or feelings, or something like that. So yeah, really interesting, and interesting to meet both some foreigners and also some locals. One of whom was very impressed with our Prime Minister. I couldn't believe that he even knew, you know, the New Zealand Prime Minister's name, but could tell me quite a few things that he liked about her, so that was quite interesting. We went back to that restaurant we really liked, and one night we went back there were these guys playing games, and so they set up this game for us to play with these metal nuts, and then did some memory game, and yeah, it was really random but really cool little sort of community feeling kind of place. And yeah, we loved that restaurant. The food was good and the vibe was really nice, and I won all the games. Sorry, Anthony. Oh, that's just some more food that we got, not there, but in somewhere in the country, kind of thing. We ate a bit. And lastly, we had a little bit of a look around this capital city again, an art centre and the Roman theatre. There's really not a lot to see in Amman. The main thing that I will remember is, and this is what we're finishing on, street art everywhere. Small, big, in car parks, on buildings, on steps, all different styles and kinds of street art. which made walking really interesting because we just kept coming across it. So yeah, it was my trip of Jordan. And that's the end of the slideshow. And let me see who's still here. Oh, we've got lots of people still here. Thanks for hanging on, even though we have gone over time. And welcome to all those people I didn't see at the beginning who've joined us later on. Oh, I can see there's lots of comments. Okay. I think from here, because I can't read all of those comments really quickly, if you have a question, I'm happy to stay on the line for, say, 10 more minutes. So if you're interested in staying on the line for 10 more minutes, you're welcome to. If you have any questions or comments, just unmute yourself and ask away.
Thank you, Kate. It was very beautiful. I bet you had a really great time. Beautiful pictures, beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a lot of ruins and mosaics. That was kind of, summing up Jordan. But yeah, we had a great time. I'm pleased you enjoyed the pictures. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kate. Really enjoyed it. I'm curious, so many beautiful pictures. Can you tell us maybe what were some of your very favorite things about the country, especially in terms of the people and the culture, and maybe even the food, but especially in terms of the people and culture and what you observed, because you had some good examples there already. People seem very kind.
Thanks, Renee. People were very friendly. I guess the way we were traveling, though, was quite, independently. We had hoped to do a workaway, which is what we've done in other countries, which is where you stay with locals and, help volunteer in some way in exchange for accommodation. And the reason we like doing that is because you get to know the people better. So we actually didn't have that many opportunities to really get to know the culture. I couldn't really say that I know that much about the culture or the people. They were very friendly, and especially in contrast to Israel, where we'd just come from. The people there were not as friendly. So that was quite noticeable. We loved our time in Israel, but the people were definitely friendlier in Jordan. But because of I guess we were in this little tourist bubble, we weren't really mixing with locals, except for that conversation night, which was great. And also that host in Jerash, he was a relative of our host's actually. His English was completely fluent and his knowledge of history was amazing. So we listened a lot to him and enjoyed his perspective on things. The population of Jordan, I can't remember the figures now, but it's huge percentages are Palestinians, and the way that the situation in Israel has also changed the situation in Jordan in terms of the population makeup is quite considerable in the last 70 years. But sorry, I can't really answer your question.
That sounds great. It sounds like a great trip. I want to go. Thank you very much. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else got a question? Oh, someone is very quiet. Very, very quiet, but I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
You might be better to type your question. Someone has asked about the Jordan Pass, and that's something you could buy online, although when COVID first hit, I had a look and it was not being offered because they weren't encouraging tourists to come. But if anybody is considering traveling in Jordan, definitely get a Jordan Pass. It pays for your visa, it includes your visa cost and then all the entrance to virtually every site. So, it's so much cheaper and easier just having that pass. And yes, you purchase it before you enter because it includes your visa. I mean, not your visa, but the cost of your visa. So you definitely get it online. Just Google Jordan Pass. You buy it online before you enter the country.
Kate, one question. First of all, it was just an amazing presentation. I'm so impressed now that I'm starting to think, wow, maybe I should travel. I never had Jordan on my list. I'm more Latin America and those regions. And is it recommendable, because I used to travel on my own, is it recommendable for a female to travel on herself?
Yes, I was traveling with my husband, so I'm not sure, but I certainly found the people very friendly. I was never in any uncomfortable situations. Overall, I think people are quite respectful. We traveled in Iran on a different trip, and also there I felt very safe, probably safer than in New Zealand in terms of the way men respect women. So
Really? Oh my
yes.
gosh, okay.
Yeah, so I think, I don't know if that's the same in Jordan, because I didn't travel there by myself like I did in Iran, but I think overall there's, yeah, I mean, if you dress modestly and, you know, then it's fine. If you're walking around in mini skirts, you might get some unwanted attention.
Well, no. There might be some, I'm not that stupid, but I'm impressed now that you say safer than New Zealand. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, Iran was. Yeah, I felt like it was very safe, and I didn't travel by myself in Jordan, but at no time did we feel unsafe. People were very friendly and helpful. People are asking questions about the cost, and I'm sorry, but I can't remember. It was last year, and I actually can't answer that one. And thank you, Margaret, for your comment. Great, thank you. Pleased you enjoyed it. Yes, you do need to buy a different ticket for Petra at night. That is not included in the Jordan Pass, so you can get that as a separate ticket. And I contemplated getting the Petra at night experience. I'm really pleased we didn't, because exploring Petra during the day, especially early in the morning, was so nice. And I think I would have been quite exhausted if I also went at night, because there's such a long walk in that you have to do both days. Yeah. Great. Any last questions or comments?
Super last question, Kate. I was just wondering what month you went, and if you think there's a good time or a really bad time, preferred time to go to Jordan. I'd really like to go.
We went in November and it was perfect. I don't like the heat. So, you know, even November, which is early winter or almost winter, is still hot for me, you know, down in the south when we were in the desert. And Aqaba, I mean, it was November, but it was still very warm. So I think that was a perfect time. It was great. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
It was a bit cooler in Amman, but we kind of liked that after a couple of months of traveling in hot weather. And even in Amman, it wasn't cold, not really.
Great, thank you.
If anyone's still on the call that didn't tell me where you're from, at the beginning I asked if people could just put a comment in to say where they were zooming in from. If you didn't do that at the beginning, would you mind doing that? Because it's really interesting for me to see where people are listening in from, and thanks for all those who have done that already. You're in Tokyo, Renee. Oh.
Yes, I am. Here I am. It's very hot here at the moment.
Oh, it's very hot. Well, it's winter here in New Zealand.
You are back in New Zealand now then, I think. Wow.
Yes, we timed our trip really well because we were away from October to February. We got back at the start of February, just before COVID hit.
Yeah. Wow, great.
So, so we were very lucky. And we are from Ashburton, Romina, which is 1 hour south of Christchurch in the South Island of New Zealand. That's where we live. And where we're probably going to be for quite some time while the world remains in a global pandemic and our borders are closed. We do enjoy traveling. And after Jordan, we went to Cyprus and then Denmark, where I used to live, and then Oman, which is, after Iran, my favorite country to visit. So I'm hoping to do a presentation like this probably next year about Oman. So stay tuned. Now, for those of you who are still on the call, could you do me a favor and just complete this little feedback form? I'm going to put it in the chat. So if you click on that link, it should open up in another field. And if you could finish, if you could just answer that when we finish the call, I'd really appreciate your feedback. Thank you. Great. Someone asking about the low season for Jordan and Israel. I'm not sure, but certainly when we were in Jordan, we were often the only tourists at places we went to. Not in Wadi Rum and Petra, but a lot of other places it was very quiet. So perhaps that's the low season. Although for me that would be the ideal time weather-wise. Yeah. Someone asking. Oman was really great. I haven't been to Algeria or Libya, so I can't do a talk about them. So thanks everyone. I think we will call it a night. I hope you've enjoyed this, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to go back through all my photos and relive my trip with you. So thanks for joining in.